Jesse Foster welcomes you to Father Nation, where other dads illuminate your path to become a better father. Prepare to enter into the man cave.
And welcome to Father Nation. This week, we have one takeaway. I asked many different dads here on Father Nation if they would give me one takeaway from the episode. So what follows are the one takeaways from Father Nation episodes. So sit back and enjoy.
The most important thing about being a good father is to understand that it's all about your kids, and that a lot of times you have to put your own issues aside in order to focus on them. I mean, whether you're tired that day, whether you had a long day at work, or something's going on, you just don't feel like doing something that day, but your kids really look up to you and they depend on you. And a lot of the things that you do, I mean, even though you may not want to get up early, or you don't want to get out of bed when your kid's having a nightmare, or you really don't want to go make them a sandwich because you just made them one, and why are they asking for another one? But you put your own stuff aside and you do that stuff for your kids because it makes their life better, and it shows that you really care about them. So when you have kids and when you become a father, you have to really understand that it's not just like, I'm going to have my regular life plus a kid. It's like your entire life is going to change, and pretty much everything that you do and who you are and what you're into and how you spend your time, if you're doing it properly, is going to be about your kids. Now, I'm not saying that to the point of where you're, running yourself into the ground and you're not taking care of yourself and all that stuff. Not to an extreme, but I'm talking about, you turn off the football game to go spend some time with your kids if that's what you want, if that's what they want to do, or you plan some family time, or you don't go out drinking with the buddies one night and you read books at home or something like that. You really got to focus on the kids if you have kids, because if you don't want to spend time with them and don't want to take care of them, then what did you have them for?
If you want to be a better dad, work on becoming more emotionally intelligent, I guess, and emotionally healthy, and allow yourself to feel the things that you haven't allowed yourself to feel, and take appropriate action, because your children are going to learn to regulate their own emotions by watching how you regulate yours, and they're going to need you to regulate their emotions when they're really young too, and that can be hard to do if you're not in touch with your own emotions. So that's the one takeaway I can tell you to take away, maybe not from this, but as advice to a new father. That's the route I would start with.
That kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning with dad lifts, where you got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. And I guess that would apply emotionally as well, right?
I mean, if you can improve yourself in any aspect of your life, it's going to carry over to you being a father. So there's nothing that you shouldn't do if you're doing better. Better is better.
Based off our conversation today, I'd have to say that fatherhood is not what the media portrays. It's the role of a man as a dad is more complex than most people can understand. I mean, psychologically, my bachelor's degree includes child development. I can say that a father is a necessary role for the healthy development of both boys and girls. But it's also a transactional, intimate relationship that most of the world doesn't see. And I think that's the challenge that people need to look at, is fatherhood isn't what TV says or what the news says. Fatherhood is the everyday in and out. And fatherhood, requires everybody to team together to make it the best it can be.
My final takeaway for all the dads out there is to consider the responsibility that I just spoke of. Whether you're the breadwinner of the house or not, these are crazy modern times, and it doesn't matter that much anymore. Who's the breadwinner, or even who's the head of the household. So if there was ever an emergency, it's your responsibility as a father figure to be prepared to handle emergency situations, whatever they may be. So maybe it's, a stranger at the door trying to get in. Maybe it's a bad injury that one of the kids has sustained. Maybe it's a natural disaster that has damaged your home. Whatever that emergency is, you're the one they're going to look to for strength and for answers and to remediate whatever the problem is. And so it's your responsibility. I once had a friend tell me that it was my responsibility if anything ever bad anything bad ever happened to my family, it was my responsibility because I didn't do something to stop it. It was my fault. It wasn't anybody else's fault. It was my fault. And that really stuck with me. That made a deep impact. That it was my fault if something went wrong. Now, of course, there are random emergencies through life. You don't know what's happening. You don't ever know what's going to happen tomorrow. There are steps that you can take to be better prepared, and that's your responsibility as a father.
My really just basic, boil it all down to a simple takeaway is that the God of the Bible is the absolute best model of fatherhood you can find anywhere. So look to him, ask questions about fatherhood of him. All other fathers, I believe, are merely apprentices under the true father. So if I've said anything valuable or true here, it's only because I'm just relaying what he's taught me. So really, he's the fountainhead of all fatherly wisdom. Look to him.
I do estate planning a lot, and what that is I deal with wills and trusts. And I do that for a lot of younger families. I do that for older people as well, established people and grandparents as well. But one thing that I hear from a lot of newer families starting out is, I don't need a will because I don't have anything. All I have is debt. And I sit them down, I say, but you have something real more important than money. You have kids. And they say, yeah. I say, who's taking care of your kids if something happens to you? And they look at me blankly. I say, the will is what tells the court who you want to take care of your kids. So one thing that I really want people to take away from this, beyond how great it is to be a father and how even when you think everything's going wrong, it's really going well, is once you become a father, you really need to take on a new role and new responsibilities. And that means planning far, far more than you ever thought you would have to. But one of the things that you really need to plan for is, what if something happens to me? If you're a father, you need a will. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you're depending on what state you're in, you may need other documents. Florida is big on trusts. Texas is big on trusts. And that's something you sit down with an attorney and talk about. But you need a will, and you need it better than the legal Zoom wills. You really need to find an attorney and sit down and talk with them, at least about a will. In New York, we do something called a standby guardianship. If you can't take care of your kids, who's going to take care of them for you? It's really important. It's something that you really need to think about, and it's something that you really want to have a plan for, because the worst case scenario, and my day-to-day is living in the worst case scenario, which makes me really fun at parties, is something happens to both the father and the mother of the child, and then the grandparents and the aunts and uncles are fighting over where the best home is. And all of a sudden, everybody's fighting for the child, but that can get ugly in a court battle. And there's no guidance from the parents of the child, who now can't speak for themselves. It's really important that people make this decision, and they talk about it, and that people know what they want. And the best way to do that is to write it down in a formal document, and that document is a will. And I think one major takeaway is that people need to go out and do that.
The fatherhood is so important. It's, to me, like I said, the highest form of leadership. I think that fatherhood means so much to me. And, everything from, there's more fathers today involved in their children's lives than in any other generation, meaning connecting and taking them to school and changing diapers. And then oftentimes the perspective when I tell people I work with fathers is that, oh, that's great, we need to fix fathers somehow. And I often tell people that we're actually in a place right now where fathers are really involved with children's lives. And to me, what I like Father Nation to take home is that it's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about continually to try to get better a day, each and every day, and do the best you can.
I just want to give a shout out to the dads out there and say, if you're listening to this, there's a reason you're listening to this. You want to be a better dad. And you know what? My hat's off to you. If you're listening to this, it's because you want to be a better dad. You want to be a better father. You want to learn. And I celebrate that. The people that need to hear this podcast, Jesse, are the people who aren't going to listen, right? Why? Because they're biological dads and they're not present in their kids' lives, or they don't take the time to want to get better. So I just want to celebrate the men and any women that are listening to this who are parents and say, look, if you're struggling with your kids, I've struggled with mine. Here I'm called a parenting expert. I've given I don't know how many parenting seminars and programs and spoke around the world. And my most painful moments in life were where I've come home and come to grips with the fact that I screwed up as a dad. And that hurts. Your kids are your greatest sense of joy, and they're your greatest sense of pain when you've made a mistake. That's okay. Feel the pain. Live through it. Understand that you're trying to get better at what you do. Give yourself a pat on the back, and then commit yourself to being better today than you were yesterday, and saying, I'm going to get better at this tomorrow. So that's my final words of wisdom. Don't stop learning. Don't stop reading books. Don't stop, celebrating the fact that, hey, being a great dad is a journey. It's not a destination.
I'd say being a father is a full-time responsibility in addition to being a lifetime responsibility. It also means that you really do need to be a role model 24/7, not being perfect 24/7, but trying your hardest and knowing that you've got 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 pairs of eyes that are watching you more than you know. I'd also say there's no better investment that you'll make with your time than the time you spend with your kids. And, there's the cliche about you can never spend too much time with them. And, they say, well, I spent all this time working. It's like the cat's in the cradle, Harry Chapin kind of thing. So, but for sure, there's no better investment you can make than the time spent with your kids.
Well, it sounds like a broken record, but listening, I think it's magic. If you're a good listener, if you're able to put your own judgments and your own agenda aside and listen to your children, I think it will work wonders. So that's the one thing that I would emphasize.
Yeah, I think one final takeaway would be this whole thing about love is spelled time. And, as dads, I think we're so passionate about being action-oriented. I know with me, I'm very action-oriented. So with my kids, I always want to do stuff with them. But I think what they need is not the doing as much as the being. So I would say if you're listening and you're struggling with this whole being versus doing dilemma, if you choose the being, your kids are going to really learn, absorb, and connect with that. Just you being there with them. So love is spelled time. Spend time with your kids. That's what they desperately need. And that's what you need too as a dad. You need to spend that quality time with them just as much as they need to spend it with you.
In general, my takeaway on fatherhood and the golden thread of fatherhood is to be there. All this talk about how parents do this or that, it's great, and hopefully it's very helpful, but there's nothing I have found. There's nothing more important than being present and just being available. That's where it all begins.
I think as people, we spend too much time worrying about our rights and not enough time focusing on our responsibilities. I think that we're so concerned about making our lives easier that we forget that we can and we should do hard things.
Don't expect yourself to do a perfect job of this, parenting that is. Our lives aren't a telly show, and there are no script writers feeding you lines and making it all work out nicely in the end of every episode. Just do the best you can, laugh off the failures. If you can do that and pass that attitude on to your kids, you'll all be doing fine.
One final thing that I would say is being a father, boy, it has to be the greatest job in the world. I think about all the things that maybe I use to define myself, firefighter or American, human, any of those, father has got to be the top of the list. It's really what I feel like we're put here for, is to bring forth kids that are going to love God and that are going to grow into compassionate, loving, responsible people. And when you sign up for that job, boy, jump in with both feet. Don't be afraid. Just embrace it and run with it. It's the greatest thing ever. You're going to have your best moments in life. You're going to have your worst moments in life because of it. But regardless of the moment, every one of them is worth it.
I think writing is probably one of the nicest things you could introduce your children to, because when they sit down to write a story, it's really their story. No matter how good or how poor a writer they are, how good or poor a student they are, no one could ever write the story that your child or any child could write. That's his. That's why I always loved writing, and I guess that's why I went from math teaching to writing, because rather than search for the one right answer, there is no wrong way to write a story. And the beauty is that when you write it, it's really your story. It's not someone else's. I guess encourage your children, our children, to express themselves, not to express ourselves. To let each child express himself or herself.
It's a bit hard-hitting, but I would say gestation and lactation are the only things that you cannot do as a father. Have the confidence, believe in yourself. There is nothing that you cannot do as a dad with your children apart from those two things.
Today's show is brought to you by the Cashflow Freedom University. Ben Leibovich, who's been a guest on this program several times, is an accomplished entrepreneur, author, and real estate investor. In his Cashflow Freedom University, Ben delivers comprehensive yet affordable financial literacy and real estate investing education. Having been able to secure his family's financial future, Ben teaches us the core concepts, tools, and techniques that have enabled his success, and can yours. Hundreds of people have benefited from Ben's Cashflow Freedom University. If your family's financial future is a concern for you today, perhaps it's time to take a look at Ben Leibovich's Cashflow Freedom University. For more information, visit fathernation.com, head on over to the products page,